Did Israel just admit that it has nuclear weapons? As Israel's war against Hamas entered its fifth week, conflict perception took a sudden and significant turn. In a rare, if not unprecedented outburst, an Israeli minister, Amichai Eliyahu, declared that a nuclear bomb on Gaza was a possibility. Perhaps it was unintentional, but for the first time, an Israeli politician or official has acknowledged the existence of nuclear weapons in their arsenal. And around the same time, the United States announced the deployment of a nuclear submarine to West Asia. America, in fact, has declared that it will intervene if Hezbollah, based in Lebanon, opens a second front against Israel. Let's just break it all down for you. On Sunday, this Israeli minister was suspended, not dropped, just suspended, for suggesting using a nuclear bomb in Gaza. Amichai Eliyahu, an ultra-nationalist politician, is part of Prime Minister Netanyahu's ruling coalition. Eliyahu serves as the heritage minister, and he made this threat during a radio interview. In fact, he expressed dissatisfaction with the scale of Israel's retaliation in Gaza. And when the interviewer asked whether he was advocating the use of some kind of atomic bomb, Eliyahu responded with, quote-unquote, "That's an option." And this marks the first time an Israeli minister has implied that the country possesses a nuclear weapon. Israel has never formally acknowledged having nuclear weapons. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office swiftly responded by issuing a statement. It calls Eliyahu's nuclear threat disconnected from reality. The Israeli Prime Minister's office also underlined Israel's efforts to protect, quote-unquote, non-combatants in Gaza. The statement said, and I'm quoting, Eliyahu's statements are not based in reality. Israel and the IDF are operating in accordance with highest standards of international law to avoid harming innocents, and we will continue to do so until our victory, quote-unquote. But it's important to note here that despite this provocation, Eliyahu was not sacked from his post. He was only suspended from cabinet meetings until further notice. Following the outcry over his remarks, Eliyahu later stated in a social media post on X, formerly Twitter, that his comment regarding the atomic bomb was metaphorical. However, this attempt to rectify his statement did not prove to be successful, as it did not escape the notice of the Arab nations. The League of the Arab States issued a statement slamming the Israeli minister's remarks as racist. The statement read, "The racist statements of the Israeli minister Eliyahu are revealing. Not only does he admit that they possess a nuclear weapon, but he also confirms the reality of the Israelis' abhorrent racist view towards the Palestinian people." Saudi Arabia also criticized the Netanyahu government for not dismissing him. Meanwhile, Jordan has said that the minister's remarks were a call for genocide and a hate crime, quote-unquote, against the Palestinians. And today, in a rare move, the United States military announced the deployment of a nuclear submarine to West Asia, a strategic message aimed primarily at regional adversaries, aimed primarily at Hezbollah and its principal ally and mentor, Iran. The U.S. has dispatched a guided missile submarine, even as the Biden administration says it wants to avoid escalating the ongoing Israel-Hamas war into a broader regional conflict. The U.S. Central Command confirmed via social media that an Ohio-class submarine was entering its area of responsibility. Now, although the social media post did not specifically identify the submarine, the U.S. Navy operates 4 Ohio-class guided missile submarines, which are former ballistic missile subs converted to fire Tomahawk cruise missiles rather than nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. And each of these submarines, by the way, is capable of carrying a payload of 154 Tomahawk missiles, significantly outstripping the capacity of the U.S. guided missile destroyers and providing 4 times the armament of the U.S. Navy's latest attack submarines. Each Tomahawk missile can accommodate a high explosive warhead weighing up to 1,000 pounds, making the threat impossible for any adversary of the U.S. to disregard. The US military rarely discloses the movements or the operations of its fleet of ballistic and guided missile submarines. Instead, these nuclear-powered vessels operate in virtual secrecy. At the very least, this conveys a strong deterrent message directed towards Iran. And America already has 2 carrier strike groups in the region. The announcement comes as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken holds a series of meetings in West Asia. The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also recently held discussions with the Israeli Defense Minister. The US, you see, has emphasized that civilians must be protected and humanitarian aid for Gaza must continue. But the US has also affirmed its commitment to deter any entities seeking to escalate this conflict, specifically referencing Iran and Hezbollah. The decision comes after frequent low-level attacks on US forces stationed in Iraq and Syria. The US aims to convey that larger attacks will result in a significant response. And let's not forget, all this is happening as the war in Gaza rages on. Israel says its troops have reached Gaza's coastline. They say that they have split the Palestinian enclave in 2 between North Gaza and South Gaza. An intense weekend of airstrikes saw dozens reported killed at a refugee camp, and communications down once again before being restored this morning. Israeli forces, it is in its ground operation against Hamas, surrounded Gaza City from the air, land and sea. They say that its infantry forces will enter the city in the next 48 hours. But the plight of the residents in Gaza has deepened the humanitarian crisis. And even as the death toll continues to mount, Israel is in no mood for a ceasefire. In fact, it has rebuffed such claims, saying that any deal would require the release of all hostages held by Hamas. This despite the US also now pushing for a humanitarian pause in the fighting. The CIA chief and President Joe Biden's top diplomat both are in the region. Amid growing anger at the civilian suffering, Washington is now trying to contain the conflict. The CIA director, William J. Burns, reached Israel on Sunday and held discussions with leaders and intel officials. You see, after at first supporting Israel unequivocally, the US is trying to now prod Israel to pursue a more targeted approach to attacking Hamas. The US is telling Israel to allow pauses in the fighting for aid to enter Gaza and do more to avoid civilian casualties. Clearly, the US is caught in a tough balancing act over Gaza. And in the face of the escalating tensions, a deepening humanitarian crisis, and the specter of a nuclear dimension looming over the conflict, it is becoming increasingly clear all parties must ensure that this war does not become a wider conflict. And we have some breaking news coming in right this minute. South Africa has now decided to recall its diplomats from Israel for further consultations on the situation in Gaza. Now, this decision coming amid a rise in civilian casualties from Israel's war with the Palestinian militant group Hamas. Let's quickly go across to our correspondent, Calden Ongmu, who's getting us more details on this. Calden, what more do we know at this point?
Thank you so much. What I can tell you today, that's the minister in the presidency, that's Kumbuzo Nshabeni, today while giving a briefing on the outcomes of the cabinet, that she announced that South Africa and Chad, actually she said South Africa have announced that they will recall diplomats from Israel for consultation in response to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Now, you must remember South Africa is the second country after Chad in Africa that's doing that. And she also said that, South Africa has 3 diplomats in Israel to be recalled. And she did not mince her words while saying that cabinet has also noted that the continuing discharging remarks of the Israeli ambassador to South Africa about those who are opposing the atrocities and the genocide of the Israel government. So minister said that, and also she said that it is becoming very untenable. And she says this kind of genocide under the watch of international community, especially South Africa, and it cannot be tolerated at all. And she also went on to mention, saying that South Africa is also considering the current position of the Israeli ambassador to the country while they are recalling its diplomats from Tel Aviv for consultation. But you must remember, South Africa, for time and again, since the start of this war between Israel and Hamas, there has been several protests, several marches that have taken place. ANC, that's the governing party of South Africa, marching to the Israel embassy, calling for President Cyril Ramaphosa to say you must shut down this embassy. The opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, also took a very strong stance on saying that they want the ambassador of Israel out of the South Africa. Besides that, there has been actually several protests that are still going on even today. There are other protests that have been planned for the coming days too.
Right. Calvin, the immediate question that arises is what about the other African countries? Do we see them following suit as well? What more can you tell us on that front, given the stance that's now been taken by South Africa?
So definitely this war has divided the world. Like I said, South Africa, after Shad, that was announced, Shad also, we saw reports coming in today itself saying that they are recalling their diplomats from Tel Aviv. So South Africa has become the only second African country to do so. While some of the African countries does support are pro-Palestinians, you've seen other countries supporting Israel saying same thing as what the West are saying, that they have the right to defend themselves. But South Africa has clearly, from the get-go, always maintained their stance on where they stand. They've always said that South Africa is for Palestine. They are not going to change their words. They're not going to miss their words. In fact, the Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, also is talking very sternly on this, saying this is not the kind of situation and this is not the way that innocent people in Gaza should die. South Africa taking a very, very strong stance on this. So South Africa and Chad, we've seen, are not the only nations to call the diplomats back from Israel since the Gaza conflict began.
Right, Carlton, this also coming in the backdrop of the Iranian foreign minister writing to the BRICS countries, in fact, for pressurizing Israel to stop the assault. So a lot has clearly been going on behind the scenes, and this latest development only adds a layer of what is expected to come ahead from the region at this point.
Sorry, can you repeat your question? I can't.
Calvin, I was just talking about how the Iranian foreign minister earlier had written to the BRICS countries as well in order to pressurize Israel to stop this assault. So there clearly has been a lot that's been going on behind the scenes. Just a quick backgrounder for our viewers, just to explain how things reached this point as far as South Africa's stance is concerned.
Definitely, most of these countries, since the start of this war, people have been engaging a lot. The countries have been engaging a lot. You mentioning that the Iranian foreign minister, has urged member states of BRICS to intervene in this Israel-Hamas conflict and demanded that, this is a dire situation in Gaza and it must be put on the bloc's agenda. BRICS countries should definitely get together and decide on what's going to happen. As of now, Russia has spoken about it very openly. South Africa has always maintained its stance what's happening. So basically, it's China. China hasn't openly spoken about this as of yet. So it is something that the BRICS countries, member states, that's why earlier I said that the DIRCO minister, Naledi Pandor, who is South Africa's international relations minister, emphasizing very sternly, saying that this is definitely something that the BRICS nations should come together and discuss.
Right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Calvin, thanks very much for joining us with all of those updates. Of course, we will be tracking those developments very closely. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.